By the time he was 27, he had already stopped expecting anything from life. Not because something dramatic had destroyed him, but because nothing ever seemed to change. No matter how hard he worked, he stayed in the same place. No matter how many times he told himself things would improve, the next day always looked exactly like the one before it. There was no dream left to chase, only bills, exhaustion, and another walk home in the dark. He lived in a room so small it barely felt like a home. A single table, a thin mattress, a cheap meal that tasted the same every night. He was not the kind of poor that made headlines. He was the invisible kind, the kind that blends into crowds, gets ignored in offices, and disappears from memory the moment he leaves a room. He had no family waiting for him, no one asking where he was, no one expecting him to become anything. What made it worse was not the suffering. It was the repetition. Wake up, work, eat, go home, sleep, then start again. Even his thoughts had become repetitive. He no longer imagined a better future. He only measured how much energy he had left to survive the next day. His life had not ended yet, but it already felt finished. And then, on a night that felt no different from the others, everything ended. A crossing, a bright flash of light, a sound too sudden to understand. Then impact. There was no final speech, no grand realization, no chance to fix anything. 1 second he was still walking home, and the next his first life was over. But death did not stay dark for long. Instead of nothingness, there was warmth, voices, brightness, movement. At first he thought he was dreaming. Then he realized something impossible. He was alive again, not in the same body, not in the same place, not in the same life. He had been reborn into a world that felt expensive even before he understood what money was. The room was too clean. The people around him were too careful. Even the silence felt polished. And unlike his first life, where no one would have noticed if he vanished, this time everyone seemed to care that he existed. They spoke gently, moved quickly, protected him like he already belonged to something powerful. As the years began to unfold, one truth became impossible to ignore. He had not been reborn into an ordinary family. He had been born into a dynasty, a private estate the size of a village, a fleet of cars he would never need to understand, staff who bowed, guards who watched, doors that opened before anyone touched them. He had gone from having nothing to living inside more wealth than most people could imagine. And at the center of it all stood his father, a man the world described with words like genius, titan, visionary, kingmaker, the richest man in the world, a man who did not merely own companies but moved governments, shaped markets, and frightened competitors without raising his voice. People admired him from far away. Up close, they feared him. Even as a child, the boy could feel it. This was not just wealth. This was power so large it bent everything around it. For a while, it felt like he had won some cosmic prize. The food was better. The clothes were better. The schools were better. He never had to wonder if there would be enough. He never had to calculate the price of anything. He had private tutors, private doctors, private security. He slept in a room larger than his entire first apartment. And in those early years, it almost felt as if death had given him an apology. But dreams have a way of revealing their cracks. The first strange thing was how often he was watched. At the gates, in the halls, in the car, at school. Even when no one was speaking to him, someone was always nearby. At first, he thought it was luxury. Then he realized it was control. He had everything, but almost none of it felt free. He could not leave the estate without permission. He could not make spontaneous plans. He could not wander outside just to feel the world for himself. Every movement required notice. Every trip required security. Every outing became an operation. The more valuable his life was, the less it belonged to him. And for the first time, he began to understand something his first life had never taught him. Even privilege can become a cage. His father provided protection, education, access, and a future built from unlimited resources. But affection was another matter. The man was never cruel in the obvious way. He did not need to shout. He did not need to strike. His distance was enough. Every conversation felt like an evaluation. Every glance felt like judgment. He was not being raised like a son. He was being prepared like an heir. By the time he was 10, every hour of his day had a purpose. Languages, economics, negotiation, history, public behavior, media handling, security drills. It was not enough to be wealthy. He was expected to become someone worthy of inheriting an empire. And although everyone called him lucky, he often felt as if his future had been decided before he could even speak. As he grew older, he noticed the way people looked at him, not with friendship, not even with curiosity, but with calculation. Some wanted influence, some wanted proximity to power, some wanted the father's approval through the son, and some were simply waiting, patient and silent, for a weakness they could use. He had become important without ever earning it, and that made him valuable to people who had never cared whether he lived well or died young. Luxury solved many problems, but it created others he had never expected. He had staff, but not closeness. He had attention, but not trust. He had protection, but not peace. Every beautiful room felt colder at night. Every expensive gift felt less personal. He had once believed that money would erase loneliness. Now he knew something darker. Sometimes power only makes the distance around you wider. The empire built by his father was not only admired, it was hated. There were lawsuits, rival corporations, political enemies, betrayed partners, hidden scandals, and people who had lost fortunes because of one decision from his father's office. He had been born into unimaginable wealth, but also into a long list of people who wanted that family to suffer. And once he understood that, the guards no longer looked excessive. They looked necessary. That was when fear entered the story. Not childish fear, real fear. The kind that arrives when you realize your life is useful to other people. He was not merely the son of a billionaire. He was leverage, a message, a weakness in human form. If someone wanted to hurt the richest man in the world, they did not need to attack his towers. They only needed to reach what he could not replace. The first attempt came fast, too fast. A route that was supposed to be secure. A moment that was supposed to be ordinary. Then shouting, breaks, movement, confusion. He did not fully understand what happened until later, but he understood enough. Someone had tried to take him. And from that day forward, the illusion of a perfect second life was gone. Money could buy protection. It could not erase danger. In his first life, death had felt meaningless. In this life, it felt personal, because now he had something to lose: comfort, possibility, identity. He had gone from wanting life to change to desperately wanting this one not to end. And that fear made everything sharper. Every dark car outside, every unfamiliar face, every silence after midnight. He didn't know how long he had been there. Minutes, maybe longer. Time felt broken inside that room. Every sound outside made his chest tighten. Every second stretched into something unbearable. He was alive, back inside the safety of walls that once felt like a prison, but now felt like the only place that made sense. No one explained everything. No one needed to, because he understood enough. They didn't fail. He just wasn't taken. This time, in sitting there staring at his hands, he realized something he had never felt before. This life could end just as suddenly as the last one. In his first life, death had been meaningless, random, empty, almost forgettable. But this time it felt different, because now he had something to lose: a future, a name, a life that was bigger than anything he had ever known. And for the first time, he didn't want it to end. After that night, he stopped living like a child and started thinking like someone who needed to survive. He paid attention to conversations that weren't meant for him, to names that kept appearing, to companies that rose and disappeared just as fast. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a rich family. This was a battlefield, and he had been born in the center of it, so he made a decision. He wouldn't be passive, not this time. If danger was part of his life, then he would understand it. If enemies existed, then he would learn how they think. If this world was built on power, then he would find a way to survive inside it. For the first time, he believed this life could end differently. Eventually, he confronted his father, not as a child, but as someone who finally understood the cost of everything around him. He asked questions about the enemies, about the risks, about the life he had been born into. But his father didn't apologize, because men like him don't build empires by avoiding consequences. They build them by surviving them. And whether he liked it or not, he had been born into those consequences too. For a while, things became quiet again. Security tightened. Routes changed. The outside world moved on. And slowly, the fear began to fade. Just enough for hope to return. And that was the most dangerous moment of all. For the first time in a long while, everything felt quiet again. The tension had faded. The chaos had settled. Even the guard seemed less alert. Standing there above the city, he allowed himself to breathe, to think, to believe that maybe he had made it through the worst of it, that maybe this life would be different, that maybe he had finally learned enough to survive. But the kind of world he was born into doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. There was no warning, no footsteps, no voice, no second chance to react, just one distant sound. And in a single moment, the son of the richest man in the world fell. Power couldn't save him, money couldn't protect him, and just like before, everything disappeared. And then he opened his eyes again. A different place, a different body, a different fate. But one thing remained the same. This wasn't the end. It was just the next life.